Hello, everybody, and thank you for showing up on short notice. As you're well aware by now, I have made a decision relative to the leadership of our football program. Derek and I visited at length very early this morning. I want to say, because it's factual in nature, that I've really enjoyed the 13 months that I've had to work with Derek. And we have a very open and honest and respectful relationship. And all of our conversations have reflected that as the season has progressed, and it was no different this morning. I told Derek that we were going to move in a different direction with new leadership for our football program, and he handled it as you would expect. He handled it in a very mature manner. He very respectful and appreciative manner in terms of his being the head football coach at the University of Tennessee for the past 3 years. It meant a lot to him, and I'll tell you that while the results, which are very, very important, were not what he wanted, not what the team wanted, not what our fan base wanted, that Derek Dooley did indeed improve this football program. There is no question about that. He inherited a very, very difficult environment, one that I am now very familiar with, having been here for these 13 months. And quite honestly, he was given a pretty short stick to take into that battle. And I think, given those facts, that he did a good job in a lot of areas in putting a solid foundation under our football program. Derek knows this. He grew up in it, as did I. This is a result-based profession, and you cannot ignore the results at the end of the day. As I told our football team and our staff, I met, of course, with Derek first, and then the staff, and then the entire football squad. This team was close to having a very good season. And I admire the fact that they never came unglued, so to speak. They never pointed fingers. They never said, "This is your fault, not my fault." They showed a lot of maturity through a very, very disappointing football season in terms of the excruciating losses in October, the close games, and I let them know that I really did admire that. It was a tough morning. The one thing that people sometimes forget is, yes, coaches are paid well, they're compensated well, and yes, they do know what the expectations are when they enter the profession. But they're human beings with spouses, kids. It's tough. Today's a tough day for that staff, and it's a tough day for our football team. But we will now move forward in a search process with the goal of securing the best coach we possibly can to come and lead the football program at the University of Tennessee. You've heard me say this before. This is a great place. It's a tremendous place. We have tradition, we have history, we have a brand that is still meaningful. But we have a long way to go to get back to where we want to be. And you can't put all of that on the coach. I don't care if his name is Vince Lombardi or Derek Dooley. We have an obligation as an administration to give our coaches the resources they need, the support they need, intrinsically and extrinsically, to get us back to where we want to be. And so this will be an effort, collective effort from a lot of people to have us take our rightful place in the Southeastern Conference and beyond. I'd be happy now to open it up for questions and try to give you the most direct answer and the most honest answer I can give you to any question you might have.
Dave,
Evan?
You've talked a lot about the financial challenges over the last year that you've been here. Given the large buyouts that are going to have to be paid to Derek and his staff, how is that going to affect things going forward as far as what you can offer the new staff?
Well, we're not going to let that be a detriment, Evan, to securing the best coach we can. I've talked to the Chancellor at length about that. We have a $1.9 million reserve, which in the Southeastern Conference is really unheard of. We compete against people who have reserves of $50 to $100+ million. So we're in a tough position financially. But the Chancellor doesn't want us to be at competitive disadvantages of any nature, be they financial or academic or in any other arena where we're trying to compete and get back to the top of that pyramid. And we're in a tenuous position. We're at a crossroads with our athletics program. But we have people who understand that and are committed to helping us overcome those obstacles. So that won't be a detriment. Will it be, is it a concern? Sure, it's a concern. We've invested heavily, the athletic department has invested heavily in the university, and we should. And now the Chancellor is committed to taking some of that investment, the athletic generated revenues, and investing it back in athletics to help us stabilize financially, because that's what we need short term. And then when we get into the new TV contracts, Chancellor Cheek's committed that those new revenues will come to athletics. But that's a couple of years down the road. So we've got a lot of strategies in place that we have to implement to get where we want to go.
Dave, do you usually use a search firm, or do you like to do these things kind of yourself?
We probably will not use a search firm. That's the thinking at this moment.
You said that you gave Derek the opportunity to coach against Kentucky.
Yes.
And he declined. Did he explain to it all the reasoning that went behind that?
He did, and his concerns were the players. It was not, Derek is not at all bitter. He is not concerned about himself in that regard. He talked at length about his concern and how difficult that might be for the players, and it might take away their focus on the final game of the season, and particularly the seniors. So his concern, Chris, was the players and not himself.
You said that Derek inherited a very, very difficult environment, one that you're now familiar with. Can you elaborate on that? What are some of those difficulties?
Well, first of all, as you well know, this will be our fourth football coach in 6 years. This is not what I wanted, and I don't think this is what we really needed relative to stability versus more transition. We've had 12 presidents here since the year 2000. We now have 4 football coaches in 6 years. We need stability, but we need to find stability through a process that we're engaged in now. We have challenges. We have some competitive disadvantages that have been identified that everyone on our campus is working to overcome together. We have some academic competitive disadvantages that we're eliminating. These are all historical in nature. This has been the case for some time, and we're now beginning to address and rectify some of those disadvantages that are real in nature.
What characteristics do you look for in a coach as you move forward? What are some of the parameters that you're going to establish?
Well, you called me about wanting the job, John, so I'm going to go ahead and announce that. Yeah, it's not what John Adams told me. Obviously, we want a coach who knows how to be successful, who's had success, and knows the difficulty of climbing the ladder in the Southeastern Conference, and can appreciate and identify with what that takes. We want somebody with integrity. That's important. We just had our probation extended, as you're well aware. We don't have any margin for error. We have to have a culture of compliance that is the number one priority in our athletics department. The profile is one that you would expect it to be. Some of the people will approach, they won't want to engage until their seasons are over. We are not, some people have this false sense that, oh my gosh, we're late. We're not. I've done this many times, and I can tell you that we're not. We're fine. People need to take a deep breath. We're not. The door's not closing on our opportunities to find the right person.
Dave, how
Search
involved
firm.
were you in helping Derek find a defensive coordinator and replace some of his staff last season?
Heather, I've never been involved in the hiring of an assistant coach other than meeting with the prospective assistant coaches at the head coach's request. I've told head coaches ever since I've been a director of athletics that, I'll meet with them, I'll talk, I'll do anything you want me to do. You hire who you want, but you then have to be accountable for your hires. That's the same as all of you. So that's been a standard operating procedure, and I think the right line to walk.
No search firm, do you anticipate contacting athletic directors directly then, get permission, and then speak to the coach? And also, would you be comfortable making a move prior to bowl season being completed, with the knowledge that coach may come here after that bowl game?
There are a lot of variables, and no searches are ever identical in nature. Those variables will be, like I said earlier, some coaches won't want to engage until after their seasons are over. You may have others who are in a different scenario that may be able to talk to you. I have friends in this profession in my 29 years in athletic administration who I trust implicitly, who I think share a level of expertise on the type of people that we'll want to explore, that I will talk to, and I trust those people. So I'll reach out to a few people of that nature.
Was there a point before last night where you felt during this season that this program needed to go in a different direction?
Well, so what I wanted to do, Rick, was give Derek Dooley and that staff and those young men every opportunity to succeed. Relative to the players, every opportunity to reach a bowl. That was one of their goals that was still remaining going into last night's game. For Derek and the staff, every opportunity to try to turn the corner. And throughout the month of October particularly, we were very close to doing that, but couldn't quite get there. So that's how that unfolded. But until today, at no time did I tell Derek Dooley before this morning that we were making a change.
Dave, when you sit here and talk about the competitive disadvantage academically, financially, crossroads for the athletics department, what is your sales pitch to a candidate out there, given what you've outlined here as the problems or concerns this department has?
That we're correcting every one of them. The coaches will know what those are. They'll do their homework just as we'll do our homework. My pitch to them is what I said to open this press conference. This is a great place, Brent, and this is an attractive place to come and be the head football coach of the University of Tennessee and to be the person responsible for providing the leadership that takes us back up the hillside.
When did you get the reassurances that the things you have outlined are going to be corrected? When did you feel comfortable in saying what you said today? When did you learn that?
We've been having these discussions for several weeks, and I feel comfortable. Well, I feel very comfortable. What Chancellor Cheek wants, and he's been great. He's been a great listener. You have to remember, again, a lot of these things are, as I said, historical in nature. They've been going on for a while. And we've simply, talked about the elephant in the room and how can we make progress toward eliminating anything that may be perceived by potential candidates as a hurdle that perhaps would be tough to get over. We're going to get over all of them.
Dave, Derek's taken a lot of heat recently. Social media, just fans in general. Is the AD here? Is there anything you can say to Tennessee fans relative to Derek, his situation, and maybe the stuff he's going through right now?
I think, again, this is a tough profession. And, I think the passion of our fans is one of our greatest assets. And sometimes that can be displayed in a variety of ways. But we are very, very blessed with an extraordinarily passionate fan base. And Derek knows that, and Derek has said that as well. But I think Derek Dooley's a good person. He really is. He's a good husband, good father. He's a good person. Loved Tennessee. And he did a lot of things, as I said earlier, to help set a foundation. What people see, and you have to realize, is they see Saturdays. And we had a lot of Saturdays that had a lot of things that that you couldn't put your arms around and hug in terms of performance levels. And that's part of the profession that we're in. And Derek understands that. We all understand that. I've never been offended by that. You've heard me say this many times. I would hate to work anywhere where there was no passion, where there was apathy and people didn't care what the product looked like or whether we were having success or not. I don't want to be a part of that program. And that's not who we are at Tennessee.
With that in mind, how do you temper the impatience of trying to get results versus the patience of a new coach coming in and needing to be given some time?
Well, I think the new coach is going to ask me that question early on in our conversation. 4 coaches in 6 years, I'd ask it. You know, is 3 years enough? I think that's a fair question. Well, I think you have to look at the results, and Derek would be the first one to tell you that. But I think that's a good question, and we'll have to address that.
How do you plan to manage the recruiting process with this class, the class you're working on for 13?
Good question, John. We talked at length about that today in our with our coaching staff. We talked about managing the recruiting, and we're not, obviously, this is relatively typical, these types of transitions, and those coaches are good men, too. We had a very candid, professional conversation. They're going to continue to work, as you would expect. Darren Henshaw is our recruiting coordinator. He'll work with Jay Graham and some others to spearhead. The whole staff will work it, but those two will certainly spearhead that effort. I talked to our team at length today about their responsibilities academically because we're not in a bowl. We had an issue there a year ago. We don't want a repeat of that. So we talked about things that are very important as we close out the academic semester, as we get into recruiting. We begin on the road Sunday. We can go on the road Sunday. So we talked about all of those things, and I'll have a chance as the week progresses to meet with our coaches one-on-one to continue, John, those conversations in more depth.
Pertaining to the recruiting class, do you plan to honor those scholarships to the kids that are already committed, regardless of who the next coach is?
And that's usually the case. The new coach will have to do that assessment, but we ran on some very good players. But that's a pretty typical. Coaches are used to that transition, and even prospects are used to how that will unfold.
Were you part of the meeting with the team today where Derek told them that he would not do that?
Yes.
Can you just give us a sense of what it was like and how the team received that information?
Yeah, the team was great, Heather. It was a tough meeting. Derek and I both went in together, and Derek addressed them first and did a great job. Spoke from his heart, said the right things. More than the right things, he said meaningful things to them. There were a couple players very emotional in terms of, tearing up. Tough meeting. But I thought it was good, and I thought the players, that it's a good group of young men. They're 17 to 22 years old. We forget that all the time. But they're a good group of young men, and on very short notice, we weren't missing very many players. A high percentage of them were in that room.
When you mentioned Derek, you get a tad bit emotional. How difficult is this part of your job?
It's hard. It's the toughest thing you do as an athletic director. It's not as tough, believe it or not, it's not as tough with the coach. The coach knows. The coach understands. The family's tough. And that's what runs through your mind. It's not the coach.
David, in your long experience in this business, is it fair to say hiring a football coach is maybe the most important hire? And how many of those have you done or been involved in?
Well, I've been doing it a long time, so I've done a number of them, Mike. And it's a critically important hire. I think any leadership position hire is critically important, but because of the visibility, it makes it extremely important, because your head football coach becomes the face of your program, just like your head basketball coach. In our case, head women's basketball coach, lady ball coach becomes a very visible person, not only in our community, but in our state. So it's a very, very important position.
You talked about some of the factors you were looking for in a coaching candidate. How essential is previous head coaching experience?
Critically important. I think it's very, very difficult to come into the Southeastern Conference without that being present. This league now, it's a different world. We're at the end of the football season for all intent and purposes, and we still have, 5 teams in the top 10, 11, 12 teams in the country. And I won't be surprised, despite all the naysayers who said that this would never happen last week, I won't be surprised to see 1 or 2 SEC teams in the national championship game again. This is the ultimate challenge which competitors embrace. This is the ultimate challenge for a football coach to come into this league. If you're a competitor and you want to prove your worth, come into the Southeastern Conference, come to the University of Tennessee, you'll get that opportunity.
You said there was no hurry. In your mind, what is the time frame of getting a new coach?
I wouldn't put a time frame on it because of the variables I mentioned earlier. I think it's more important to get the right person, the best person that we can possibly attract. If you had your druthers, you'd want to do it quickly, but I don't think the landscape necessarily plays into that in every case.
Do you think it's important to try to salvage the recruiting class, or is it more important to take your time to get the right guy?
I think both of those, Jimmy, are important. I think, and that's an honest response, I think it's important to not let the recruiting class come apart, and I don't think it will, but I also think it's very, very important not to race. We've got to get the right person.
Could you elaborate on what you said before about the university being at a kind of in a tenuous position, at a crossroad, and what's your vision for where it goes?
I've presented that vision to our Chancellor, and he's received it very well, and he's been extremely helpful in finding ways to implement it, Mike. And at some point, we'll talk about that in great detail. I think the financial piece is what I'm referencing more than any when I say we're at a crossroads. We've got to solve that. We can't have a $1.9 million reserve moving forward and do the things that we want to do and need to do. And we still have a lot. We have phenomenal facilities here, but we still have a lot of facility needs. And as nice as that football training center is, which, by the way, had Derek Dooley not come when he did, that design would not have been what it is. His fingerprints are all over that building, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. Everybody's building football training centers now. Everybody. So I'm tickled to death we have it, and it's fantastic. And when we finish moving in at that moment, it'll be the nicest in America. But, when you look around our conference and see the $100 millions of dollars being invested, whether it's the 2 new schools, Missouri or A&M, or whether it's South Carolina. Every place we went this year, I'd talk to my peers about what are you doing? What are the projects you have on the table? You'd be stunned. You'd be stunned at the investments that are going on around this conference relative to facilities and just investments in general.
Do you anticipate the staff staying together until a new coach is hired?
That's our intent, Jimmy. But again, certainly if those men have opportunities that behooves them to explore, we would help them and encourage them to do that. But they're professionals. They're gonna. You won't notice any difference in their work ethic, in the job performance, in terms of their commitment and obligation to the University of Tennessee and our football program.
Dave, when you first took the job here, did Derek address any of these perceived disadvantages he thought you
He did, John. He did. And again, every conversation I've ever had with our Chancellor, he's acknowledged and said, he's repeatedly said, I want you to bring me those, Dave, because I don't want us to be at competitive disadvantages.
Can you explain the decision for Derek Dooley to go ahead and do his television show that actually aired today?
Heather, we talked about that. I don't know that either one of us slept, probably an hour at the most. It was a late night when we got back, and we met very early this morning. And part of the reason for that was to talk about whether or not, what was going to happen with the television show. But he wanted to do it. He said he could do it, and he could handle it, and he would handle it. And it was his obligation. He felt like he should follow through with it. So we talked about all of those things in great detail early this morning. Jim will be the interim and will handle all the head coaching responsibilities and duties as we head into Kentucky Saturday, and he'll also do the radio show and the final TV show and handle those responsibilities.
You start your looking,
I'm sorry?
do you start your looking process at the large schools or the small schools? Or how do you start your looking process for a new coach?
Well, I think, again, when you've done it several times, you know how to do it and how to go about that process. And I think every athletics director in America, everyone that I know, you have a list of people. That list changes annually because you don't know what will put you in a coaching search. Heaven forbid. It could be a tragedy of some. You don't know what could have you in a coaching search. Now, how many of those names will, at the end of the day, get traction? That remains to be seen. And I have not begun that. I will begin that in earnest now. But I think there's a right and a wrong way to do everything in life, and this is a way I've always done it. I've contacted no one. I've back-channeled no one. I think that's fair to the current head coach. Now, do I have a plan? I do. But those conversations have not begun.
So all the rumors have been floating around town aren't true.
Well, there's not too many of the 120 coaches left that hadn't had their name in the paper already. And I suspect you'll cover the rest of those over the course of the following week.
How did you settle on Jim Chaney as the
I think Jim is well respected by his peers on our staff, and I think that Jim's very, very capable of handling the duties that we discussed today. And Jim and I will meet tomorrow to go into that in greater detail. And Darren and I will meet tomorrow, and Jay and I will meet. I'll meet with all of them as the week progresses. But Jim readily accepted those responsibilities.
The advantages that you've said from finances to the turnover to now a longer probation, how much do you think that maybe the head coaching job here has lost its luster within the last couple of years?
I don't know that it's lost that's a fair question, Heather, but I don't know that it's lost its luster so much as, again, you just track it. We haven't had success for 5 or 6 years, and we've had 5 very difficult years. But I look at that from a positive perspective, and I always put myself in the other role. Okay, well, trade places. I'm the candidate. How am I viewing this? And I would view it as a heck of an opportunity to come in and get it turned around. And if the support is there, and it is, I would have every level of confidence that I can turn it around. Jimmy?
Is there any concern at all with the most recent NCAA 2-year extension project? Would that have any impact, you think, at all on the candidates in trying to hire somebody?
I hope not, Jimmy. It's not ideal, because we're out to 2015 now. But I think we have a great staff. I think, again, we have a culture of compliance that is real and that is a priority. So I don't think that it will scare people off, but there'll be questions that will have to be answered relative to that, and there should be. But, there are programs who've been on probation and won national titles. You just have to, that's in the rear view mirror. What we've got to worry about is what's in front of us now. We can't be looking back. We got to move forward, and we got to handle all this with enthusiasm, and we will. And we got to handle it with positive energy, and we will.
How late is too late for this search? I know you want to move as quickly as you can, and you don't know the time frame, but how late is too late?
I think a lot of, in the past, Wes, a lot of hires of this nature occur sometime in the month of December. Very, very candidly, a lot of those coaches will be in New York City for the National Football Foundation Hall of Fame. Some of them will continue to play deep into the postseason, but December is a critical month.
Dave, as you know, a lot of people are willing to offer their opinions on what you should do.
What?
Yeah, I know.
Now, I haven't noticed that, but go ahead.
Can you address how you handle that, whether it's from boosters or a lot of other people, and how the process will go to ultimately making that hire?
Yeah, respectfully, because I think that's part of the passion. People should have an opinion. But also, I know that, I've got a job to do, and I have a level of expertise, and I have a level of information that nobody else has.
Guys, thanks very much for coming on.
Okay? Thank you all very much.